All right. Welcome to another online learning thing. I'm just going to move myself around here a little bit. I am Jillian. I'm with Jessamine County Adult Education and Woodford County as well. And today we're going to do a short lesson on probability. Probability is something you'll see in the science section and also the math section of the GED test. And it's kind of a, you know, I think it's fun. I think it's a little bit fun to calculate probability because it's good for your real world life as well as on the test. So we use probability to think about how likely something is to happen. So you'll see, we live in Kentucky. We see a lot of probability around here around horse racing for sure. How likely is a horse to win or to lose? But also in other things too. You see probability in a weather report. How likely is it to rain today? How likely is it when if you're playing roulette, how likely is it that you're going to hit the right number on the board? So we're going to talk a little bit today about how to calculate simple probability. So we already defined probability. I'm going to try and use this here. So probability, whoops, if I could spell, is how likely something is to happen. And all probability starts with a fraction. So let's take the most basic probability question that we ever see, which is a coin toss. So how likely are you to land on heads, over tails, when you call a coin toss? So we kind of all intuitively know you got a 50-50 chance, 50% chance of heads, 50% chance of tails with a fair coin. So let's look at how we get to that calculation. So all probability starts with a fraction. The numerator of a probability fraction is how many possible outcomes are there for you to get what you're measuring, or your measured outcomes. How many, if you call heads, how many opportunities do you have to flip a coin and get heads? Well, on a coin that has one side that's heads and one side that's tails, you have one chance of getting heads. So we'll call the top how many measured outcomes. Okay, make that line a little bit longer. The bottom number on our fraction that we use to calculate probability is how many possible outcomes are there. So when you flip a coin, you have two possible outcomes. You could get heads or you could get tails. So we'll put down here the possible outcomes. So in probability, the probability of getting heads, if you flip a coin and you call heads, the probability of getting heads would be, well, we have one opportunity to flip for the coin to land on heads and two possible options, two possible outcomes. So our probability of flipping heads or tails on a coin toss would be 1 out of 2. So again, this is like the simplest possible probability problem with just two different outcomes that are equally likely. So let's look at maybe a little bit more of a complex one. So when you're looking at probability, there are a couple of types of problems that come up a lot. So we're going to try and hit all those types. So the first is a coin toss. The second is a dice. Everybody's familiar with rolling dice. And so let's think about, oh boy, I'm going to try and draw a little dice here. So we know on a dice, we'll just kind of make our little dots here. On a dice, you have 6 sides, right? So every time you roll a dice, you could get 1 through 6 as you're coming face up on the dice. So if I were to ask, what's the likelihood of rolling, we'll say a 3. What's the likelihood of rolling a dice and getting 3 as your roll? Well, how many 3s We look at the top number as the measured outcome. So what are we measuring? We're measuring how many threes. So how many threes are there on a regular standard dice? Well, there's just one. Just one side says 3. And then we think of our possible outcomes. How many sides are there total? How many different numbers could you get? Well, you could get 6 numbers. So our probability of rolling a 3 would be 1 out of 6. So let's think about maybe some more complex problems. So what's the likelihood that you would roll a 2 or a 4? Let's see, 2 or 4 on a dice. Okay, so this time we have more than one measured outcome. So we can look at our numbers and think, okay, how many 2s are there on the dice? Well, there's 1. And how many 4s are there? One of those as well. So we've got 2 outcomes that are possible that are our desired outcomes. But there's still 6 sides to the dice. So we'll say 2 out of 6. And of course, we can reduce that down to 1/3. And we'll talk about some calculator tricks in a minute with putting in probability and fractions in general. But for now, we'll say we have a 1/3 chance to roll a 2 or a 4. So let's say you have, let's think of another common example here. So we did dice, we did a coin toss. Let's think about a bag of marbles. It's the other classic probability question. So I'm going to draw some marbles. We'll have some blue ones, some green ones. 1, 2, 3, 4. Okay, and we'll put them in a bag. So here's our little pouch of marbles. Okay, so you are going to reach into this bag of marbles and you're going to pull out a marble, right? Without looking, without peeking. How likely would it be that you would pull out a blue marble? Well, we can do the same thing. We can think about our fraction, and our numerator is how many are those measured outcomes? How many possible blue marbles could I pull out? Well, I've got 1, 2, 3. So I got 3 possible blue marbles. And then we think about, for the bottom number, how many possible marbles are there? How many options are there for me to pull out? Well, I've got 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. My probability of pulling out a blue marble is 3/7. So now we can think, okay, if the blue marble is 3/7, what's the probability that I would pull out a green marble? Well, we have 4 green marbles, 4, and we have still 7 marbles overall. So the green would be 4/7 chance. The blue, 3/7. So which one is more likely to happen? Well, you're more likely to get out a green marble. And we can see that on the screen. There are more green marbles, so we know you're more likely to get a green marble. Let's look at one more type of problem. And this would be, let's see, a spinner. Let's do a spinner. Oh my. Okay. That's going very wrong, but that's okay. We're just going to go with it. Okay, here's our spinner. We're going to pretend like these are all even and perfect, and we're going to put some numbers in there. Okay, so here's our spinner. We have 8 different options, and some numbers are repeated, some numbers just show up one time. So assuming that this is a fair spinner and it's a perfect circle and that every little wedge on there is the same, what's the probability that I could spin this spinner and spin a 6? Well, we can see on this spinner there's only one 6, right? Just this one right here. So we have one possible 6 on our spinner out of a total of 8 spaces. 8 possible spaces. So our probability of spinning a 6 is just 1 out of 8. Now, how about our probability of spinning a 1? So this is of spinning a 6. Now we'll do of spinning a 1. So on this spinner, this weird crooked spinner, we have 2 wedges that are 1, 2 opportunities to get a 1, 2, out of the total wedges, which are 8. 2 out of 8, which we can reduce down to 1/4. Now, if you're not real good with fractions, that's okay. On the GED test, for both the math and the science, you're allowed to use a calculator for most fraction problems. There might be a few at the beginning that you can't, but most of them you can. So let's look real quick at the calculator, and I'll just show you what buttons to push. I don't have like an actual calculator to use, but we'll just kind of show you on here. So this is a picture of the GED calculator. If you were going to put in a fraction, like 2/8, for example, you would start with this button right here, this numerator over denominator button. So you would push that, and then you would push 2, and then you're going to use this toggle button right here to go down to the denominator, and then you're going to push 8ths and then enter. And when you hit enter, your calculator will automatically reduce that fraction for you. So if you're using this, I encourage you to pick one up if you're really studying for the GED math test, or borrow one from your adult ed center, because it's really, really helpful. So let's go back to our questions. And now we're going to look at kind of a worksheet and do some questions together. So let's see. Here we go. Okay. So on this worksheet, you see again these really like classic problems with, let me just get rid of all that, with spinners, dice. Like I said, those are our classic questions. So take a look at this, and let me see. Can I scroll? No, I can't. Okay. Well, we'll take a look at the ones we can see anyway. And we'll start up here. Go ahead and pause the video and see if you can answer these questions. See if you can puzzle these first 5 out, and then I'll put the answers over here for you. All right. Okay, so for number 1, we'll go over all these answers together just so that everybody gets it. For number 1, how many pieces are there total in the spinner? Well, that one's pretty easy. There's 3, 4, 5, 6. There are 7 pieces total in the spinner. If you spun the spinner 1 time, what's the probability it would land on a gray piece? Well, here we have 2 gray pieces out of 7. So we would have 2 sevenths. Okay, so far so good. If you spun the spinner 1 time, what's the probability it would land on a black piece? We have 1. We'll just pretend that that's black instead of dark gray. 1 out of 7, because there's only 1 black piece. If you spun the spinner 1 time, what's the probability you would land on a white piece? Well, we have 1, 2, 3, 4 white pieces out of 7. It can't be reduced, so we have 4 sevenths for that one. And then finally, if you spun the spinner 1 time, what's the probability of landing on either a white piece or a black piece? So we can count all the white pieces. There are 4. All the black pieces there are 1. So our measured outcomes, we have 5 possible out of 7. So that's our most likely one. Let me see if I can scroll when I'm on here. Oh, I can. All right, so let's look here at number 6. Put that right there. All right. So number 6. Go ahead and look at these 3. See if you can get them, and we'll go over them together after you're done. All right, so number 6, if you were to roll the dice one time, what's the probability it would land on a 3? Well, we did this one already. We know we have 1 3 on the dice out of 6 sides that we could possibly land on, so it's 1 out of 6. How about number 7? If you were to roll the dice one time, what's the probability it will not land on a 2? Now, with probability questions, they are some of the most important questions to closely read because, especially as we get into more complex probability, it really hinges on just 1 or 2 words how this is all going to go. So we see this word not. So that means what's the probability that we'll land on 1, 3, 4, 5, or 6? So not a 2. Well, there's 1, 2. But the sides we're measuring are the 5 other sides. So it would be 5 out of a total of 6 sides. So you're pretty likely to not land on a 2. And how about this one? If you were to roll the dice one time, what is the probability of it landing on an even number? Well, let's count up the even numbers. We have 2, 4, and 6. We have 3 even numbers, so it would be 3 out of 6. Or 1/2 if you're using your calculator. All right, so let's once again scroll down here. And here we have kind of a different kind of a question. This one uses this array of shapes, and we're talking about randomly selecting shapes. So let's take a minute to answer these questions, and we'll go over those together. All right. So let's look at this first one. How many shapes are there total in the array? So we have a square that's 5 by 5. So there would be 25 total shapes. All right. So we'll call that number 9. So number 10, if you were to select one shape at random from the array, what's the probability it would be a circle? Okay. So we count up all of our circles, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8. And we have 8 out of 25. So there are 8 circles out of 25 total options. So 8 out of 25. So let's look at number 11. If you were to select one shape at random from the array, what shape do you have the greatest probability of selecting? Okay, so what we need to think about here is which shape comes up the most, which is the mode shape. If you've watched the video about mean, median, and mode, which one is the mode? Which one comes up the most frequently? So I'm seeing a lot of squares. I'm going to count those up. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10. 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12 squares. We know there are 8 circles, and there are only 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 hearts. So it would be the square. That would be our most likely shape, our highest probability, because it would be 12 out of 25. That's pretty high. All right, let's look at number 12. Which shape has a 32% chance, or an 8 out of 25, of being selected? So we already did this up here. 8 over 25. So that would be the circle. The circle has the highest, or the 32% chance. Now, real quick, before I give you one more worksheet to do on your own, let's look back at our calculator here. Okay. If you have a fraction in your calculator and you want to change it to a percent, you can do that with two buttons, so 2 strokes. So let's say on your calculator, you have, let me see if I can go back. Oh, well, let's say you have 8 over 25 on your screen, and you want to change that into a percent. You can do that with the second function of this button right here. So it's really hard to see on the screen, but it has a little arrow and then the percent sign up here in green. So on the calculator, many buttons have two different functions. They have the one that's on the button itself, and then a second function that's up above it. And that's just to make it so the calculator is not humongous. So what you'll do is when you have your little fraction on the screen, you'll push the second button and then this button right here. So that'll activate the second function of the buttons. You'll push this one right here, change to percent, and then hit enter. And it'll come out with the percent that you're looking for. So now here's what I'll do. I will put down a link below this video of some places that you can go to practice probability questions that are similar to ones you might see on the GED test. So some science-y probability questions, some math probability questions, but it's all the same thing. You need to focus on how many possible outcomes are there that you're measuring, and then how many possible outcomes total. Make your fraction, and then you can either reduce that or change it to a percent. So I hope that this has been helpful to you, and I will see you in the next video. And remember, if you have any questions, just comment down below and we'll answer those as quick as we can. All right, have a great day.